the hidden secrets of the pineal gland. That is going to be today's video. We're also going to be talking about the pituitary, the thalamus, tons of parts of the brain, actually, because it is important. This is Professor Matt. Thank you for watching Psycosmos. Also, apologies for the last few videos. I was working on trying to get the audio properly functioning. I think that this is probably going to be good. I did a lot of testing with it. If it still sucks, just let me know. So let's talk about the pineal gland and what it is. I'm just going to go over some brief stuff. Most of you guys watching, my normal average viewers that watch my content consistently, you guys already know tons about the pineal gland. You know that it produces melatonin. You know that there's a lot of scientific evidence that's come out over the last 25 years that speaks about it potentially producing endogenous DMT, dimethyltryptamine. Melatonin itself is a tryptamine, so it doesn't even really matter if it produces DMT, to be honest. Just the term DMT is a bit overrated because it's the active chemical in a lot of psychoactive drugs, plant medicines specifically. So DMT itself is not an end-all be-all precursor for the pineal gland to have some kind of a spiritual gateway, harmonic resonance capability. It's not like DMT is an end-all be-all. I'm going to talk today about the Trinity within the brain. I'm going to talk today about what the pineal gland really represents. Not just the pine cone and all that, the symbolism is there. I want to get a little bit deeper. So let's just kind of jump in. Throughout many different cultures, this would be from Asiatic cultures. I'm not really exactly sure which one. It's probably in the China, India area. This specific painting, probably Taiwanese or something along those lines. But a lot of imagery surrounding the pineal gland, and as you'll notice, there's two. The pineal is often associated with two petals when it comes to the chakra system, whereas the crown chakra is the one that has the infinite petals. Now, here's the reality of it. The third eye chakra that a lot of people talk about is probably more indicative of the pituitary gland, and the crown chakra with its infinite petals is probably more indicative of the pineal gland. The reason for that is because, as you can see all that energy is kind of they've got like scales on their head here that are very similar to the pine cone. And the pituitary gland is actually two glands in one, the anterior and the superior pituitary glands, which are essentially the mother and child. And there's been a lot of iconography with pine cones specifically. You've got it, whether it's India, Mesopotamia, Greece, with the rod of, or the staff of Thyrsus, the Asclepius staff, Dionysus's staff at the Vatican. They have the giant pine cone. Obviously, I think a lot of you guys know a lot of this symbolism. The Pope's hat is like a giant pine cone, so to speak. But it's also a spiral, right? Like you can see, well, I'm not trying to sell these people's stuff, but even in like Mesoamerican cultures, there is a god called Chicomecoatl, and he comes with pine cones and like fir trees, or like tree branches, right, which represents the nervous system in a lot of symbolism. We know that the side cross profile of the brain and the inner thalamus looks very similar to the Eye of Horus from the Egyptian iconography. And yes, once again, there is the Vatican with in Mesopotamian with their little pine cones and stuff. It's funny because, again, I love to pick on the History Channel, right? If you've watched a lot of my videos, I'll pick on the History Channel a lot. It's my grandfather's favorite channel. He's 81 years old. He loves to watch his hunting shows, deer hunting and all that. But he loves those mockumentaries on, history. And I'll sit there and I'll watch it with him from time to time throughout the course of my life. And I just couldn't help but feel like those shows were just so bland. They never got all of the straight facts. I've watched like World War documentaries with him, stuff on banking and like the Fed. It'll talk about the Federal Reserve, and they just make everything seem like it's so great. Me personally, I think FDR was one of the worst United States presidents to ever exist because of what he did to inculcate the 1933 Federal Reserve Act and all that. You know, like the Great Awakening of America, essentially, is what they sold it as. But it was really a great deception. But you watch the History Channel, you ask my grandfather, who's a very smart man, mind you, but he just is completely sold on the history. And the reason I bring this up is because the History Channel also has Ancient Aliens, which is that very phoniest psyop TV show, which basically says, yeah, you know, this depiction with this guy on the wall with the pine cone, this was clearly symbolism for ancient technology of this, you know, device that could shoot out laser beams to cut the stones for the pyramid, blah, 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 blah. Those people are psyops on purpose. I actually have a picture. It's a very old picture. I would have to find it, but it's me with the aliens meme guy. You know, he's like going like this, you know, all the time. I can't remember his name. He's a nice guy though. I met him and I got a picture with him. But that was like 15 years ago. And I didn't care about the show then, and I certainly don't care about it now. But the whole point is, if you watch a lot of other stuff, you know, obviously they will not hide the history. And you can see at the base of the pine cone, right? You can see the pine cone is like the center stage. And then you've got the two peacocks here with the base. And if I'm not mistaken, there should be about 12 figures here. And that's in reference to the 12 cranial nerves, which are underneath the brain. And then the two peacocks are essentially like you see their heads, right? It's symbolism of flight. It's indicative of the dual pathways, you know, in the Kundalini aspect of this. It would be the Ida and Pingala, which are nerves, right? It's part of the vagus nervous system. There's two sides of the branching nerves that connect up into the brain. I'm going to showcase that when we get into the cranial nerves. But let's talk, you know, pineal, right? The pineal gland is situated within the inner thalamus. And here's a big secret of the pineal gland. You know, obviously it's the third eye, right? Everybody calls it the third eye. It is connected into what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which I don't think I have a picture of, unfortunately. But the suprachiasmatic nucleus is what downloads light frequencies through your eyes, and then it gets registered in your brain. And there's a couple of different parts of your brain that, you know, deal with those downloads, one of them being the claustrum, one of them being the thalamus itself. But the pineal is really the one that regulates the production. It basically tells parts of the brain what to do based on the light signals that you're receiving. Now, keep in mind, this is very symbolic because light is the quintessential source stimuli. All right, so our five senses are an illusion, right? Specifically, sight, touch, taste, smell, and sound. They're all an illusion because none of those things exist on the deepest layer of quantum mechanics. It's all light. So sound and frequency and vibration via magnetism, that's all a lower stage of light mechanics. So your sensory organs, your extremities, your hands, your feet, and everything that touches and feels through your nervous system, that's all light based as well. Your smell, your sense of smell, that is where again matter goes from a wavelength to a particle because light can do that. It can be both, and then that's what particles are made out of. They're all essentially made out of light at the end of the day. It's just how thickly condensed the light is. And so being a human being itself is just an amazing thing, right? Because we have this higher level of consciousness where we can think and act and feel, and we can navigate through life. And we are made in a divine image. So the brain is essentially like the big supercomputer that is constantly performing the tasks necessary in order to regulate our livelihoods and keep us alive. Part of that is the pineal gland's intervention into telling other parts of the brain what to do. And the way that it knows how to do that is because it clocks our internal rhythms, our circadian rhythms. Again, this is all about being spiritual or being one with the spiral. So the eyes, when they take in light, depending on if it's solar or lunar frequencies, right? So that's really important. Different frequencies are going to do different things for the brain. We work on cyclical cycles. Women know this better than men do because they have a menstrual cycle. So in other words, your body, based purely on the light that you're receiving in your eye, that's the stimuli for when your body is going to start menstruation, ovulation, etc. right? And there's a lot of factors that can impact that, right? Stress and tons of the physical factors, but there's also non-physical factors such as the light itself. So our pineal actually activates the most when our eyes are closed or we're not receiving light in the eyes. And the way that here's a big secret of the pineal gland, the way you want to kind of think about it is you have those three eyes, right? You have the two eyes obviously the two eyes here. The third eye, okay, so if you have three eyes and there's 24 hours in a day and we sleep for 8 hours, that means that 1/3 of the entire day of every single day, roughly speaking, is given to this gland. All right, so you spend 16 hours awake, 8 hours for each eye to take in the light and also the darkness, right? Because the one eye is the sun, one eye is the moon. So you're awake during, the theoretical model is you wake up before the sun. You wake up in the darkness, just like, when you were born, essentially. You wake up in the darkness, the light shines, you start your day, the light fades away, and then you fall asleep. And that's the cyclicality, right? So you wake up in darkness with the light just about to shine over the horizon. That's supposed to be like the perfect, I guess, romanticized version of what a human life should be, right? The farmer life, I guess. But it's also how we evolved over thousands of years. So the pineal essentially is the one that's active. Actually, the brain is more active while you're sleeping because it's got to do this entire washing machine situation. If you don't know what I'm talking about, when you sleep, that's when your brain cleans itself. That's when your brain essentially goes through and gets all the gunk, the non-necessary things that don't need to be there, and moves a lot of CSF. It moves a lot of stuff. Your heartbeat changes, your brain frequency changes, all of that. Now, the pineal gland is one of three major glands. So you have the two eyes in your head, of course, and you have the pineal, which acts as the quote-unquote third eye. But in response to those two eyes, you also have two pituitary glands, which are essentially like the, I guess you could say the reflection of the eyes in a symbolic way. Okay, the whole brain really is a reflection of the pineal gland itself. And the pituitary gland itself is the reflection of the two eyeballs. And you have two parts to the pituitary gland. And that's very important, right? Because as you can see here, melatonin, the sleep hormone. So our entire mechanism, our brain works off of the light signals. I guess before I jump to the pituitary, the pineal gland has calcite crystals on it. And this is really important to understand because those calcite crystals are able to house energy or electricity through the mechanism of what's called piezoelectricity. So in other words, this pine cone shaped gland, which by the way, pine cone is a spiral, right? It's a spiral and it's got all those little edges, right? And a lot of people some people say that these images are fake and stuff. I don't think that they're fake, because there's a lot of them. But essentially, the way that this basically works is a lot of people talk today about opening their pineal gland, right? They're like, oh, we have to open the pineal gland. You have to open your third eye. It opens every day, right? Like it is, now if you have it over calcified, then yes, that can actually cause issues with your rhythms, your circadian rhythms, your circulatory rhythms, etc. It can actually massively create problems in your health because your pineal is not regulating everything properly, right? Which then causes long-term health issues and reduces your ability to perform mitosis and prolong your life. Well, the pineal gland basically, it's like a flower. It's like, always situated with a lotus of some or something along those lines. Pine cone, lotus, they look the same, right? And that's because it opens and closes. So the way that a pine cone works is that it opens when heat is applied to it. It's got those scales on the outside to protect it, which is essentially the same as the microcrystals. So people are always saying you have to detox your pineal gland, which is very true. You cannot have an overabundance of those microcrystals, but those microcrystals form on the pineal gland anyway. And when it opens and closes and it gets enough activity in that regard, then you have a healthy working pineal gland. It's like a muscle, okay? But when it is just purely closed, it'll over calcify, and then that'll cause issues. But and I don't actually, I should have looked this up, so I apologize. I can't remember if the pineal opens with light or if it opens with darkness, but it's one of those, and I think it might actually be darkness. I don't think I might be wrong on that, but anyway, I think the way that it works is actually it opens with light, and when it closes is when it is able to produce the melatonin and things like that. So basically, this is my point to this. It's not about keeping your third eye open, right? The pineal has dual stages here, and it basically goes from open to close, right? It's very much like anything else in the body, okay? Not to be crass, but take a penis or a vagina. You have an on and an off switch with both of those organs, right? You have things that turn it on and things that turn it off, okay? That's basically the same as the pineal gland. And just like the genitals, if you don't have proper stimulation every once in a while of that organ, right, then problems begin to arise. Like, it's very, very healthy for a man to wake up with morning wood every morning. That's actually a healthy stimulus that shows that the man is all of his lower functions are operating properly. It's very healthy for a woman to have her system clean itself by becoming aroused over things, so that the system can flush and do its things. If you don't get enough stimulation, and I'm talking like, obviously our culture is like completely oversexed. Think like 100 years ago, Puritan society, right? Like, those people were told that they can't do any of those things, and so they didn't, and then that causes issues too. So again, it's about a balance. You need to open and close the pineal properly, and it's we're raising our vibrations, man. Like, you got to open your third eye, dude. Like, yeah, okay. If you're starting your spiritual journey, you might be in a scenario where you've got overcalcification of the pineal because you've been living in modern society. You haven't been learning, you've been drinking the hot Starbucks coffee sitting in the microplastic cup. You've been using fluoride toothpaste every single day for your whole life. Yeah, then you need to actually work on raising your frequency and blasting some of those crystals through detoxification. Heavy metal detoxes, tons of different good detoxes will help with that, and it does take some time. But if you're already on the spiritual journey, then again, once you attain that level of awakening or enlightenment, then it comes to balance and maintaining the balance. Okay, it's not about we're gonna awaken, blah blah blah, because at the end of the day, if you want to manifest the ultimate reality for yourself, it is not about raising your frequency to a point where your vibration is so high that you are able to tap into the Akashic records and download money like the Federal Reserve prints it. That's not how what you think, that the Fed has 10 dudes sitting around like meditating, and then the money just falls out of a cloud that they're magically manifesting in some back end room or deep underground somewhere. It's not how that works. They hit a button and it prints money. That's what happens. They say, oh, I'm going to hit the button and I'm going to cause massive inflation and destroy the world. And then they do that. That's exactly what happens. So it's again, the mental aspect of it is just for the conditioning of the conscious and subconscious in order for you to feel and act appropriately. Thought can only become manifest through action. All right, God is the one who patented that. So if you want to take that up with anybody, that you can take that up with God. But God said, "Let there be light." Oh, wait a second. Light can't physically do stuff. Let's make it physically do stuff. So that's really where creation comes from. You can't have the checks and balances if the things can't act appropriately with free will. Okay, so going back to the gland itself. Yes, it's a spiritual gateway. Yes, it has the ability to house energy. And it is one of the stimulation points of where the heartbeat energy goes. So the heartbeat, when your heart pumps, it sends a signal up through the brainstem, okay? Which, without getting super technical, we'll just say the brainstem. And it travels up and basically makes a loop And I believe that loop goes forward, hits the pituitary, runs back and spirals inwards. That's why the pineal is where it is, by the way. The pituitary gland's here. All the signals actually, most of the time, hit the pituitary first, if I'm not mistaken, because it has to ricochet around in a spiral. Because remember, we're going spirals up, spirals down. So all the energy from the body to get to the pineal gland, to get to the inner thalamus, it comes up and spirals around. And that's why the pineal is back here, because it's in the hidden chamber, right? It's not like, right there down in the front. The pituitary is the mama gland. You have the anterior and superior. Okay, so the superior one, the one the superior one, I believe, is the child one, and the anterior one, I believe, is the mother gland, and that's the gland that is responsible for most of the secretions of biochemicals that feed the rest of the body down. But the anterior, I believe, if I didn't get those mixed up, that one is more about signaling. Okay. And so I'm doing this, like, by the way, I'm doing this right off the riff, right? So I didn't really do too much research for this video. I'm just going right off of my brain from my research and all the writings that I've done. So I could be wrong in some of the things that I'm saying, but I don't think so. So pituitary gland, yeah, here we go. Okay, so you've got anterior. Okay, I could have just went to this, and the posterior, or most of the time it's called the superior one. And so this one is responsible for specific hormones like oxytocin and ADH. But that's the posterior or the superior one, I believe. The anterior one, that's the one that's mostly, you can see how different they are. That's the one that's mostly responsible for all this. And here's another reality shifter for you, okay? The pituitary, everything above the neck is an inverted reflection of the below. So even though the pituitary is the one that's responsible for the chemicals and is considered the mother-child gland, located in the part of Taurus within the brain, you see the threshold is actually like right where the pituitary and the pineal are separate, like right here in this middle part here. So this is associated with the sign of Taurus, which is a feminine sign, and the pineal is associated with the sign of Aries or Pisces, which Aries most of the time is masculine, and Pisces, of course, is feminine, but it's kind of a bridge of both, right? And the pineal gland is one gland. Okay, so the one gland for the pineal is very synonymous or similar to the one womb or the clitoris, right? Whereas the pituitary is the inversion of the testicles. The Taurus makes the milk, right? So Taurus, being the bull, this makes the milk, right? So you've got the land of milk and honey. The honey is associated a lot of the times with Aries and Pisces too, but for the sake of this, medically and the entire system, it's associated with Aries. Aries, of course, is ruled by Mars, but is exalted by the sun, which is golden. So Aries is a lot of the time associated with the sun, whereas the pituitary is associated with the moon or Taurus, which is also, the moon is exalted in Taurus. Okay, and this is why those exaltations occur in astrology, because the pineal is responsible for the honey, the pituitary is responsible for the milk, and vice versa. The man is responsible for the honey, right, and the woman is responsible for the milk, right? But that's on the that's on the higher end, right? So the man creates the blood, which is like the honey, basically. It's the red or the gold or the white, not the white. It's the red or the gold, which is often associated in alchemy. So the man has the musculature on the top part of his body, and the women make the breast milk on the top part of their body. But then when you go below that, it gets inverted. It gets reversed. The man makes the milk on the bottom part, and the woman makes the honey on the bottom part. So, it's like very interesting the way that it's basically inversions, flip-flopping between the brain, the heart space, and the lower genital area, and it's almost like a sandwich. You know what I mean? So It's super interesting. You know, the anterior pituitary is the one that's mainly responsible for all the endocrine related information, but it's basically mother and child, right? Like one of them is giving specific chemicals, but like oxytocin, which is pair bonding and stuff like that. But almost all of the majority of the chemicals are coming from that anterior pituitary gland. So it's very cool to see because like you get to kind of basically see the whole creation story, you know, the whole story of mythology, and it's all in the brain, right? And the pituitary is one of the major parts of that, right? It's the feminine aspect in the brain. But then I want to talk about a couple other things. One is the limbic system. Basically, kind of looks like a big scorpion or a big, reptile kind of strange creature. And when we feel massive amounts of fear, basically, it's a cycle, as everything is. The thoughts, the dark or negative thoughts begin to travel down through the brainstem, activates parts of the limbic system in the cerebellum, and then that activates parts of the kidneys and other parts like the liver, and that secretes a lot of stress and adrenal hormones. And what those do is they inflame the parts of the limbic system in the brain when those chemicals finally come back up into the brain. So you have a stress response or you have a fear response. It puts pressure on the brain to activate survival mode. And you can do this just by, like, let's say you got a big work project and your boss is like, hey, you've been slacking, and if you don't get this work project done, you're fired. Well, that's going to start adding massive stress to your amygdala, your limbic system, which then hijacks your brain. It's called cortisol hijacking. So this is essentially the real third part. So keep in mind, remember what I said. The posterior pituitary in this graph, anterior is the mama gland, but the posterior is the child gland. It's the son of the Trinity. Okay, where does that send information? It sends it to, the breast specifically, but mainly the kidneys. So this one right here mainly talks with the kidneys. Where are the kidneys? Below the diaphragm. Remember that everything below the diaphragm is our realm of existence. The kidneys are essentially Jachem and Boaz, the two pillars. The Venetian aspect. It is a lower split apart reflection of the top of the brain. So it's the Libra opposite to the Aries, which is the cerebrum, which are the two halves combined. These are the two halves separated. So the kidneys act as one of the biggest factors in the lower brain's, I guess you could say, working mechanism. And when that child gland talks too much with the kidneys, when that child gland is too stressed out, that is what's causing tons of stress on the limbic system. Now, keep in mind, it's the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. The Son, before Christ, before Vishnu, before Krishna, the Son was always associated with the demiurge, that like lower deity creator that's trying to attach itself to the mother to steal her energy and basically conquer her, or assault her. That's like a big thing, and it's the frequency that a lot of those bad men tap into when they hurt women, or they just are bad people in general, and they do bad things for clout and for money and power and stuff like that. So this is one of the bigger controlling indexes, because the pituitary is what's really sending the signals here. So if you're thinking negatively, then you don't tap into the mother gland as much, which helps with your rest and digest system. It helps with that, one of those parasympathetic sympathetic nervous system combinations, right? So you have parasympathetic and sympathetic, one of which is the fight or flight, and one of which is the rest and digest. Those two glands in the pituitary essentially rule over which one of those you're going to be in. So if you're leaning into the mother, the love, right, and you're leaning into that side of things, the positive side of the pituitary gland, then your endocrine system will function normally. If you're focused on the other side, which is the fear side, right, that's the more negative side of the pituitary gland, then basically you're going to be tapping out of the endocrine system. Your body's not going to get all the chemicals it needs. it's going to be releasing the wrong chemicals, which then are going to inflame the parts of your brain that put pressure on your decision-making cortex. Do you guys understand how this operates? So in other words, think, act, feel. That's what I always talk about, right? It's one of my Trinity systems. Thinking controls feelings, controls actions, controls feelings, controls thinking. And it starts in the brain, goes down into the body, comes back up into the brain, and that's the cycle of life that you create. You wake up, you see the light from the sun. First, you feel ready to get out of bed. You get out of bed. Then you go and you do stuff, and you start blah blah blah, and then eventually you go back to sleep. I also want to talk about the 12 cranial nerves. If you'll notice, remember everything's in a divine image. These 12 cranial nerves almost kind of look like a body. They almost look like a human body, with this being a head, this being the midsection, this being like the tail of the body, right? And that's on, this is on the bottom view of the brain, but this is still the exact same thing. If you'll notice, we've got these little these OBs right here, which are the olfactory bulbs. So basically, when you really look at the brain, we've got these little antenna. Okay, so these little antenna, along with the other inner antenna, we're basically like a giant walking radio tower. I kind of look at these little antenna like we're a little bug. Like look at it, look at us. Like this is what is ruling over all of your faculties. It's like you're a little bug. And Jesus Christ did say, "I am but a worm." Paraphrasing here, but a lot of prophetic figures have said that for specific reasons. Not that they actually mean that. They're not calling themselves a worm like they're lowly. It's kind of a symbolical meaning. But anyway, this is really like what controls us, and this is where a lot of horror writers get like these ideas for like these creepy monsters and stuff. It's because when you cut us open, we kind of do look like one. But we're made in a divine image. This is the divine image of God, so to speak. This is his home, right? And you can get into tons of other things, but basically the last thing I'll say is about the piezoelectricity. This is where activating the pineal gland. This is like the practicality of it, right? So how do you activate it? Well, first of all, it's always being activated by different things. Secondly, the most important part of it is cleansing it and clearing it. And you can do tons of different detoxes, exercise, meditation, but really at the end of the day, what it comes down to is understanding the harmonics between the brain and the body, and putting those in tandem with each other so that they can function properly. And that's really it. Light activation, darkness stimulates the pineal gland. So if you want to put yourself in darkness and draw the curtains and meditate, that's probably a really good idea if you're trying to activate the pineal gland more. Sleep really helps with pineal gland stimulation and cleansing as well. So sleep is very good for you in that regard. But I would say that there's still a lot that we're discovering about the pineal, but that's some of the secrets that I have for you today. So if you'd like to support me, you can check out my online university. Here I am adding tons of new courses. As you can see, I'm working on a symbology course. I've got meditation and prayer. A lot of these say draft because I'm actually still working on them, and I am getting a lot of these courses done. I think right now it says on the bottom here, I've got 42 courses. I've got about 30 of them already done, and I'm planning the other additional ones here. So as you can see, there's going to be a lot more courses that are joining the online community. We've got 61 members. Lots of people are having fun in here. Now, if community is not your thing and you would rather do something on your own time, I do have an AI tool, Astraya.ai. You can check out your inner alchemy cycle. It'll tell you, it'll plan it all out for you. I just went through mine recently. So it is telling me when my next window is, what I should be doing, what I shouldn't be doing, etc., etc. It's a very exciting time to be alive because these are very, very cool. And I'm making constant updates to both my AI tool and my online university as I go. So I appreciate you guys. I have books, I have courses, I have one-on-one sessions, coaching sessions. If you're interested in working with me, please feel free to reach out. Lots of love to you guys, many blessings, and I will see you in tomorrow's video.